June 1943, Rabaul Airfield, New Britain. The tropical heat shimmers above the tarmac as a squadron of Imperial Japanese Navy pilots gather around their Mitsubishi Zeros, engines idling, the scent of fuel mixing with salt and sweat. Word has spread through the ranks. American carriers are fielding a new fighter. The men call it the Tubby. Photographs leaked from reconnaissance show a broad, barrel-chested aircraft, too tall, too thick, too heavy to turn like a Zero. The pilots smirk. The old hands shake their heads. Another American monster, one says. All power, no grace. They laugh because they know what happens to big targets in the sky. The Zero was the symbol of agility, light, elegant, deadly. The Americans, they believe, are building flying anvils. But far out across the Pacific, on the flight deck of the USS Essex, mechanics are rolling out the first Grumman F6F Hellcat under a morning sun. It gleams dark blue, its folded wings stretching like the shoulders of a heavyweight stepping into the ring. The test pilot climbs into the cockpit. He knows what it looks like, bulky, inelegant. But when the throttle opens, the aircraft roars to life with the fury of a 2,000-horsepower Pratt Whitney R2800 engine, the same beast that powers Thunderbolts and Corsairs. The deck crew shields their faces from the blast of prop wash. The carrier's wake stretches out like a white road across the Pacific as the Hellcat launches into open sky. And within seconds, the truth begins to take shape. The Tubby isn't slow. It's a missile with wings.
August 31, 1943. Over the Solomon Islands, mid-afternoon, the air is dense, hot, shimmering with humidity and the smell of oil. Ensign Robert Bob Duncan, flying one of the Navy's first operational F6F Hellcats, scans the sky ahead. A silver horizon blurred by haze and ocean glare. His squadron's mission is simple: intercept a formation of Japanese dive bombers heading toward the American fleet near Bougainville. At 18,000 feet, the radio crackles. "Bandits, 2 o'clock high. Looks like Zeros. Plenty of them." For a moment, the Hellcat pilots tense. The Zero still rules the skies of the Pacific. Lighter, nimbler, and legendary for its dogfighting grace, has shredded American Wildcats for nearly 2 years. The enemy spots them first. 12 Zeros roll into their attack, slicing down from the sun like white-hot knives. The Americans brace for the familiar story, another impossible dance they can't keep up with. But this time, the story changes. Duncan yanks back on the stick and feels power. The Hellcat climbs like it's being pulled by a hand from heaven. The Zeros swing in behind, expecting to corner him in a turn. But the F6F doesn't play that game. Instead, Duncan pulls into a vertical roll, the heavy frame shrugging off the G-forces that would rip lesser planes apart. The first Zero overshoots. Duncan levels out, presses the trigger. 6 .5 caliber groundings erupt with a thunder that fills the cockpit. The enemy's wing shears clean off, vapor trailing as it tumbles toward the sea. He can hardly believe it. The aircraft that looked too heavy, too slow, too American, just outclimbed, outgunned, and outlasted a Zero. In less than 2 minutes, 3 more Japanese fighters are falling from the sky. The rest disengage, their formation shattered. Back at Rabaul, survivors land in stunned silence. Reports spread through the ready rooms. The new Grumman, it's faster than it looks. The Tubby one, it climbs like a demon. The laughter begins to fade, because for the first time since Pearl Harbor, the Japanese realize they are not the hunters anymore. They are the hunted.
By early 1944, the Pacific sky has changed color. What was once Japanese airspace, dominated by the elegant silhouette of the Zero, is now stitched with contrails of Hellcats climbing from carrier decks that seem to multiply by the month. At dawn, the USS Bunker Hill rocks gently in calm seas.
On her deck sit dozens of blue F6Fs lined in perfect symmetry, wings folded like sleeping giants. The flight crews move with choreographed precision, refueling, loading ammunition, checking engines that sound more like thunder than machinery. They call the Hellcat the Ace Maker, and for good reason. Pilots who once flew outdated Wildcats now step into cockpits that forgive mistakes and absorb damage. The Hellcat's armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, and bulletproof windshield give them a margin of survival the Zero never could. In combat, it doesn't need to dance, it just needs to endure. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, that endurance becomes legend. The Japanese launch nearly 400 aircraft in what they hope will cripple the U.S. fleet. The Americans scramble every Hellcat they have, more than 200 fighters launching in rapid succession. The air controller aboard the carrier Princeton watches the radar screen bloom with red dots and mutters, "This is going to be a turkey shoot." He doesn't know that phrase will define the battle forever. High above the waves, the sky becomes a hurricane of tracers and engine screams. The Hellcats slash through enemy formations, diving from altitude with guns blazing. Zeros try to turn and twist away, but every evasive move burns fuel they can't afford to waste. Within minutes, the difference in philosophy, Japan's obsession with agility versus America's obsession with durability, plays out in fiery clarity. Zeros that once pirouetted gracefully now fall apart under .5 caliber bursts. Hellcats that take hits simply keep flying. By the end of the day, more than 300 Japanese aircraft are destroyed. The U.S. loses fewer than 30. On the carrier decks, sailors cheer the returning fighters. On the Japanese side, silence fills the airfields. The men who once mocked the Tubby Grumman now whisper another name for it, the Blue Death.
Mid-1944, the Pacific War has entered its most brutal rhythm. Island after island burns under the relentless push of American carrier groups. Every morning begins with the same metallic chorus. Hellcats roaring to life, steel decks trembling under the fury of takeoff. Each pilot knows they are flying the heaviest, toughest naval fighter ever built, and yet it handles like destiny itself. Grumman's design philosophy was simple. Make it strong enough to bring the pilot home. The F6F's fuselage could absorb bullets, its oil system could keep running even after shrapnel damage, and its massive engine turned sheer weight into unstoppable momentum. One squadron commander summed it up in a single line: you can dive, you can climb, you can take hits, and you can come back. The Japanese Zeros still possessed their deadly grace, but by now, their weaknesses had become fatal. Their light frames ignite easily. Their thin skins rip apart under the Hellcat's heavy guns. And worst of all, Japan's new pilots lacked the years of training that once made the Zero legendary. For the Hellcat, this isn't a duel anymore. It's a demonstration. At Formosa, Marianas, and Leyte, the pattern repeats. The F6Fs launch from carriers in waves, rolling out in blue columns like a wall of sky-borne armor. When the Zeros appear, the result is always the same: brutal efficiency. Commander David McCampbell, flying his Hellcat Mincy III, downed 9 enemy planes in a single mission, a record that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. He returned to his carrier with fuel left for spare. That day, the ship painted 9 rising suns beneath his cockpit, 9 kills, 1 sortie. And the ship's loudspeaker blared a single phrase that echoed across the Pacific: Hellcats, Hellcats all the way. Meanwhile, Japanese pilots began to report something their officers didn't want to hear. We hit them, they don't fall. The mockery of Tubby had vanished. Now the word among the Imperial Navy was Grumman no Oni, Grumman's demon. Each new battle confirmed it. The Zero, once the emperor of the air, had met its predator. And it was not sleek. It was not elegant. It was unstoppable.
October 24, 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in human history. The sky over the Philippines is a frenzy of flame, metal, and smoke. Below, the sea churns with fleets stretching beyond the horizon. American task forces clashing with what remains of the Imperial Japanese Navy. At dawn, hundreds of aircraft launch from American carriers. Waves of Hellcats, Avengers, and Helldivers rising into the golden haze. The radio chatter crackles with calm voices, masking adrenaline. Quote, "CAG, this is Blue 2, Bandits, 11 o'clock high. Roger that, let's get 'em." From the east, the Japanese Zeros dive in tight spirals, like falcons striking prey. But what they meet now are not the slow, clumsy Wildcats of 1942. They meet Hellcats. Fast, armored, and hungry for payback. Dogfights erupt over the bay. The Hellcats roll, dive, and climb with brutal precision, their heavy machine guns shredding the sky in lines of molten fire. Each burst tears through aluminum wings and rising suns. The once feared Zeros tumble like burning leaves into the sea below. Within hours, the balance of the Pacific has flipped. By nightfall, the Hellcat fleet racks up more than 300 confirmed kills in a single day. Even Japanese intelligence officers can no longer deny the math. The F6F's kill-to-loss ratio stands at 19-1, a number so extreme it sounds like propaganda, but it isn't. It's engineering, discipline, and sheer industrial power, all compressed into one roaring machine. One Japanese ace, grounded after being wounded, wrote in his diary, quote, "We built our planes like swords. The Americans built theirs like hammers, and the hammer always wins." By the end of 1945, the Grumman Hellcat had destroyed over 5,000 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied naval fighter in history. It had turned ridicule into terror and proven that bulk, when paired with brains and courage, can dominate beauty. When Japan finally surrendered, many captured pilots mentioned one American aircraft by name. Not the Mustang, not the Corsair, but the Hellcat. They said, quietly, with a mix of awe and resignation, "We laughed at the Tubby until it ruled the skies."